Episode 54. 1954 was the year of the first mass polio vaccination starting in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. When you combine both your hands and wrists, you have 54 bones in total. And how much do I like coffee? Enough to know that the first drip brew coffee maker was patented in Germany in 1954, called the Wigomat. Beyond MD, episode 54, here we go! Hey everyone, I'm grateful to have you join me again on the Beyond MD podcast. Today's episode is by popular demand. It focuses on understanding and optimizing the travel reward system, optimizing the way we use points, because I think that all of us want to travel the world and enjoy more experiences. I think that everyone is impacted by this subject. It's been a widely requested topic, and I have Ricky Zhang, the founder of Prince of Travel, on the show today. There's a lot of information today, so a quick table of contents. First, we're going to start by understanding how the travel reward system works. We're going to understand how our credit score works and the different factors that impact it. We'll talk about how to earn points at a faster rate and which point currencies are the best in Ricky's opinion. I also have links to my preferred credit cards in the show notes below. We're going to talk also about redeeming points in an efficient manner with an emphasis on Aeroplan. And then also we will talk about the most optimal credit card portfolios for people who don't want to spend too much time playing the game. And I'll also shed light on what I do towards the end of the show. So a bit of information on my guest, Ricky Zhang. I've been following Ricky now for at least 6 months, and I've honestly been blown away by the quality of content that he's putting out and the knowledge that he has. So since 2014, Ricky has earned and burned tens of millions of points in pursuit of his dream of traveling the world. And he's very motivated to inspire others to explore the globe just like he has. And with miles and points, those aspirations are not as out of reach as many may think. He's passionate about showing others what they can achieve. All of this led Ricky to found the Prince of Travel in 2017. This website has all the information you could want to know on credit cards and other travel hacks. It has a great newsletter that I subscribe to, and Ricky's YouTube channel, Prince of Travel, is also a phenomenal educational resource. Highly suggest people to check that out. And now to my interview with Ricky Zhang. Hey Ricky, welcome to Beyond MD. Where does the podcast find you today?
Hey Yatin, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm at home in Vancouver, British Columbia. You caught me just before I headed out on a trip, so good timing.
Oh, amazing, amazing. I know you have a lot of good stuff going on in your life. First of all, congratulations on your wedding. And I understand you're going off on your honeymoon. So maybe just share with people, like, where are you going off to celebrate this?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. My partner and I just got married last month. Did a very, very nice intimate wedding over on the West Coast in Tofino. And now that we've wrapped that up and, had a few weeks to ourselves, we're embarking on a 2.5-week trip to Africa. We're going to go to Kenya, Tanzania, do some safari, check out a few properties out there. And then we're popping over to the resorts and islands of the Seychelles off the east coast of Africa. So that'll be exciting. And then we're taking a few nice flights on the way there and on the way back as well.
That's amazing. I mean, you're mentioning so many of my favorite places. Like I was lucky to go to Kenya, Tanzania with my dad many, many years ago. Have not made it to Seychelles, but Tofino has become one of our favorite places as a family. So I spent 4 years back in the day in school in Vancouver and made a lot of friends there. So we're back in BC frequently. And I think Tofino is a magical place. I think you guys picked a great place. So Ricky, one of the reasons I'm really excited to have you on today is I've been following you for some time now, and I think you're educating people on a topic that is relevant to everyone. Like everybody wants to travel, create amazing experiences and memories for themselves and their loved ones. And I think you're doing a really good job educating people on this. So Ricky, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, like how your fascination with traveling all started. And then I'd love to hear about how you kind of figured out that you could convert this into a business, which we now know as Prince of Travel today.
Sure, absolutely. I've been fortunate to be traveling a fair bit since a young age. I've, always been very grateful to my parents for taking me to new places when I was a child. My story also kind of reflects that in the path that it's taken. I was born in Vancouver and then I moved back to Asia at a pretty young age. So about 1 year old, we lived in Hong Kong for a while and then we moved to Beijing until I was 18. And then from there, I went back to Canada for university. So I've had this sort of exposure to, both Eastern and Western elements in my formative years, which really fueled my fascination for continuing to travel the world and learn more about, the world that we live in as I entered, my late teens and my early 20s. Now, this was also a time that I was a student and didn't have, the most impressive budget at hand to travel the world. And so I was looking for ways to, unlock new adventures without necessarily needing to pay full price. And that's just often how my mind works. I'm always looking for those, for those tricks and for the advantages that you can seek, no matter what you're doing. And so it was around 2014, 2015 that I first figured out some of the, the possibilities with credit cards and travel benefits that you get. For example, accessing the airport lounge before your flight. And that was it. My initial motivation was to, I'm just flying economy class back and forth, but the lounge seems interesting. Like, how does that whole thing work? So I dug a bit deeper into it, did some research, and really, figured out that, okay, just by getting the right credit card, I could get access to the lounges. And from there, upon further research, it was like, okay, the credit card points that you actually get, can actually elevate my flight itself. So instead of economy class, there's the possibility of flying in business class and first class as well. So from 2014, 2015, I was doing a study abroad in the UK, and then I came back to Canada, and then I just went gung-ho, applied for a bunch of credit cards to test out this theory and see if it works in practice. And it did. And then 2016, 2017 was when I started to, build some of these round the world trips and really unlock these experiences. And that was also the time when I figured, there's more and more travel bloggers, travel video creators, whatever you want to call it, online, kind of sharing their experiences. This is something that is underrepresented, especially in Canada. More people need to know about the sheer value that's at hand here. And so I went ahead and, created some resources on Prince of Travel, built that up over the years into what it is today.
I think that is amazing. I just love to hear people's journey and how they got to where they are today. So thanks for sharing that, Ricky. Now, before we get into kind of earning points, redeeming points, I think it's important for people to just get a bit of a snapshot on how this whole process works. Like how does the points system work? Like, why am I able to book flights on points? How does that benefit? Well, obviously it benefits me, but like what's in it for the airlines? Can you just give us like a 1-minute summary maybe of like how this all works?
Okay, 1 minute. Okay, no, because it is a fairly...
Give us what we need.
It can be a fairly in-depth topic, and this podcast Beyond MD, I'm gonna assume that it's a fairly, advanced audience that can work with advanced topics in their minds. So yeah, I'm happy to delve into it. Essentially, what the point system acts as is a way for airlines to solve their distressed inventory problem. Because if you think about the way that the airline model fairly uniquely works, right? If you're at a grocery store, if there's inventory that's about to go bad or about to become worthless, the grocery store can simply go ahead and discount that and then get it off the books, right? Mm-hmm. The problem facing airlines is the moment the door of the plane closes, the any empty seats that are on a particular flight are worthless, right? They can't be sold for further revenue. So up until that moment, though, the airline doesn't have the ability to discount because otherwise they lose out on price-insensitive business travelers who will pay up to very top dollar for that last seat, right? So that's the kind of unique problem they're facing, which is up until the very last minute, business travelers, which is the backbone of how most airlines make money, will pay like basically, top dollar to get their people on that flight that they need to be. So if airlines were to discount that would ruin that whole model. So the way that they, the very clever solution that was figured out around the 1980s was, instead of discounting directly on the price tag, airlines instead make these seats available for people to book with the points programs that they themselves control. And then they just drip feed the points to the travelers who book with them as a means to engender customer loyalty. So that's how the systems come about, right? Over the years, it's become more and more advanced. And we'll get to one major piece of the puzzle right away. But over the years, that's basically been the story, which is it's a way for, there's always going to be distressed inventory in the airline game. Like they always calculate, they project how many seats are likely to go unsold. And then they release those as points so that, it's the carrot that they dangle in front of people to continue flying with them, so they can continue to earn points, so that potentially they get a free flight. Like airline, I think it's the airline industry, it's the biggest example of how loyalty really influences customer behavior, because people will go crazy and really modify their behavior incrementally, right? And that's really what the airlines are looking at in exchange for the prospect of free travel. Now, this whole game got even more juiced up when airlines figured out that, not only could they influence their own customer base's behavior by issuing points, but they could partner with the banks by selling them a bunch of points, and then the banks make money by issuing points in exchange for customers spending on their credit cards. And then when if somebody's going crazy for the prospect of a free flight when choosing how to book a flight, imagine how much more that's amplified when they can decide which card they put their daily spend on, not just when they're traveling, but everything they do day to day, and that's getting them closer to a free flight. And that once again took the game to a whole other level. So that's essentially an outline of how it works. That's the reason why there's always going to be points that exist, points flights that exist. Why the whole system works, that lets you basically use your points to book flights at a fraction of the price.
I love it. Okay, let's get into earning points in an efficient way. So we touched on credit cards there. And so I used to think that, hey, if I spend a lot of money, I'll eventually earn points. And this process never used to get much priority in my life. But then after I started following you, I started to realize, well, I can actually get a lot of points if I sign up for the right credit cards, especially when some good sign up bonuses are being made available. So can you just kind of talk to us about this? Because it seems like to me that the best way to actually accumulate points in a more rapid fashion is to take advantage of sign-up bonuses. So talk to us about this in a bit more detail, and like how many points can we accumulate by signing up for the right card that would kind of fit our needs?
Yeah, absolutely. This is where different levels of the game come into play, right? Because like you said, for the average person, let's say, it's different levels in terms of how fast you're earning points, how much you're accumulating points in terms of regular day-to-day spend versus sign-up bonuses. And if somebody's not attuned to the fact that sign-up bonuses can give you, 50,000, 100,000, 150,000 points in one go, then naturally, if they think their only option is to spend and earn points the slow way, then it's not going to receive much priority unless they're already, have very high personal or business spend and thereby pay more attention to it. So for the average person, I do think sign-up bonuses is a very powerful strategic move to essentially supercharge your points balance and get yourself much closer to a dream trip that points can unlock, right? Because if you think about and basically the way it works here is that if you think about flying in luxury, so business class or first class, right? Lie flat seats, unlimited food and alcohol, and that kind of experience. When you're paying regular fares, that's 4 times, 5 times, 10 times the price. When you're paying with points, it's 1.5 to 2 times the price compared to using points for economy. So comparatively, it's a much better deal, and it's much better value for your points to redeem for these premium experiences, and think of your points as a way to unlock these experiences that you would never pay cash for. Is how I'd advise most people to go about it. And when you put in that context, well, a business class flight starts at about 60 to 80,000 points one way to Europe, and earning 60 to 80,000 points the slow way, that's $60 to $80,000 to spend. Maybe a bit less if you're using a spend multiplier, but still it's in the 5 figures, right? Whereas with one credit card sign-up bonus, you can earn that amount just by opening a new card, and there's usually a spending requirement associated with it. So you have to spend a certain amount in the first 3 to 6 months, and then the bank gives you those points as a welcome bonus. And essentially what's happening is all these welcome bonuses in the market are part of the marketing budgets of these big banks, right? They're all looking to acquire new customers and bring new customers in from other banks. And essentially, if you're aware of that fact and aware of the fact that there's nothing wrong with taking advantage of offers that are in the marketplace, right? Taking the banks up on the offers that they've put out there, you're just really maximizing the opportunities available to you in the market as a consumer for the most optimized travel outcomes that you can personally take advantage of. That's essentially the name of the game, and happy to delve into more people always have questions.
Yeah,
so
let's do it. Let's do it.
let's do it.
From following you, I've come to learn, Ricky, that certain credit cards, like some of the American Express cards, which I know will kind of come up in this conversation, but I understand that for some cards, you sign up, you get 100,000 points if you spend a certain amount in a given time frame. And I actually, after following you, learning about this, I ended up signing up for the American Express Business Platinum because it gave me a big sign-up bonus. But to get that sign-up bonus, there had to be a $10,000 expense in the first 3 months. So what I did was I was enrolling my kids in summer camp. I called the camp office. I said, guys, do you accept American Express? They said, yes. I was like, sweet, I can cover this right away. So there's a bit of planning that kind of went into this. And then I also had an idea of, okay, what trip am I going to take? So we're actually using these points for our 10-year reunion. We're going to fly to St. Lucia in November. So it all kind of worked out, but it took some planning. Can you just talk to us about like some of the things we need to think about and maybe some of the issues that people may face? They may sign up for the massive bonus, but they may not actually get all those points if they're not spending and planning ahead of time. I just like your take on this.
Yeah, it's a great point. Like traveling on points and maximizing credit cards is going to require you to think about the process of planning travel differently than most people normally do, right? And basically, to what you said, all of the success in this game is going to boil down to solid planning and a solid strategy in place, and all of the problems that may arise is going to boil down to a lack of planning. So what does that mean? It speaks to both of your points on both the process of earning points and the process of redeeming points for the actual travel, right? The ideal way to, I think, for somebody new to the game, looking to determine what's their best path forward, what I always recommend is starting with the desired final outcome. So what is the trip that you dream of taking that would be really special if you were to able to take it, if you're flying in, first class, if you're flying in lie flat seats? What is the maybe a special trip on the horizon, whether it's anniversary, whether it's honeymoon. Honeymoons are great for this because you often have lots of wedding spend in the lead up to help you with the credit card sign up prices, right? So what is that big trip? Or even if it's just like, you usually take a handful of trips per year, and there's one that you'd like to take next year that is just going to be a really special place that you think you or your loved ones will really enjoy. And I say next year because the process of earning points, like from scratch, getting the right credit card, meeting the spend, earning the points, and then booking can take, especially for a beginner who's like also learning as they go, can take 12 to 18 months, let's say, if you're truly looking to optimize. So for best results, and if you're looking to do this the right way, like if you're thinking about a trip 12 to 18 months from now, that's something that you can definitely take aim for. So think about the first step, kind of think about that destination. And then in your research phase, you'll want to figure out what are the best options for using points to fly from your hometown to, or your home continent, let's say, to that destination. What are some of the possibilities in terms of airlines that you can book, programs that you can book through, and how many points that's going to require for the number of travelers you want, and the class of service that you want. And then you have a number in mind. Here's the number of points I need, of a very specific kind of points, right? Because not all points are created equal. And then here are the credit cards. That's the last step. Here are the credit cards I need to sign up for, and the spends I need to make in order to reach that points balance so that I can go and book my trip. And then if some of those credit cards require a $10,000 spend in 3 months, so something higher than your usual pace of day-to-day spend, then that's when it's might be worth thinking about any upcoming big expenses that might be worth thinking about, like whether you can put that on a credit card or not, like you did with the summer camp. So that's about an overview of how I'd recommend somebody going about it from a strategy perspective. The more legwork you can put in upfront, the better off it's gonna work out.
So, Ricky, I've heard of people signing up for like 2, 3, or 4 credit cards at a time. And I think automatically one of the things that comes to mind is, well, what about my credit score? Because I think this is an area that people may not have enough knowledge on. So I wanted to pick your brain on, can you give us a quick overview of the different components of our credit score? And then let's just say I want to sign up for 1 or 2 credit cards. How will that action of signing up for cards actually go ahead and impact the various components of my credit score?
Yeah, this is where there's a lot of misconceptions I find around how credit in general and credit scores work. And as a result, there's a lot of I'd say like fear mongering, among like, oh, people's initial reaction is one of, oh, isn't that going to impact my credit score? And that's something I had to grapple with when I was figuring it out back in the day as well. But, it just boils down to doing your research and doing your, picking up the right knowledge that you need. And basically it boils down to, how does a credit score work, right? If you ask most people, they have no clue. But a little bit of light research leads you to the answer, which is there's 5 components, and the 5 are payment history, which is 35%, utilization, which is 30%, length of credit history overall, which is 15%, recent inquiries, which is 10%, and credit mix, which is 10%. Credit mix is just like, if you have credit cards and a mortgage, it's better than just having a credit card. But It's 10%, so it's not going to influence it too much. So you have to think about what happens when you apply for a new card, right? And the inherent assumption that should underpin our entire conversation here is that you are in a financial position to not go into credit card debt and pay interest and late fees and whatnot. Like, you're somebody who treats your credit card like a debit card. You spend within your means and you make all your payments, full payments, not just minimum, on time and in full. So, that's like basically healthy financial habits 101. And if you're in that position, then you're ready to kind of go and maximize rewards. So if you think about what happens when you apply for a new card, there's 10% of the score, which is the recent inquiries criterion, and that one takes a small dip because you've made a new inquiry to the credit bureau, right, to seek out new credit. But over time, over the next 3 to 6 months, as you get the card, as you make perfect payment history, that's 35% of your score that increases because you're showing that you can demonstrate responsible usage across a larger total amount of credit that's extended to you. And then there's 30%, which is utilization. What does that mean? It means how much of your overall credit limits are you actually using. You don't want to be running it up to the maximum. You want to be keeping it within a healthy 5 to 20%, 5 to 30% range. And as long as you do that, which I think is easily within most people's means, then that 30% also increases. So short term, as soon as you apply for a card, maybe a dip of 5 to 10 points on your credit score. Long term, it recovers. And generally speaking, most people who maximize their credit cards the way we do, we tend to have excellent credit scores because we're responsibly using credits across a very, very wide range of products. And that's demonstrated through our perfect payment history, right? And our utilization that's kept in a reasonable range.
Okay. That is a great overview, Ricky. Thank you for that. I guess one of the areas where I get a bit held up is, okay, I've signed up for this credit card. Let's say it has a fee of like $400 or $500 a year. And then let's say I kind of carry it through. Second year comes. Well, then I've already had that nice juicy sign up bonus. And now it's just accumulation on spend. So sometimes I struggle with, do I keep the card? Do I switch to something else in the same family? Or do I ditch the card altogether and sign up for something new with a brand new sign up bonus? There's lots to think about here. Can you just kind of guide us on some key considerations?
For sure. This is where it goes back to how, levels of the game, right? How aggressively do you want to go? How much do you want to put in, and how much reward do you want to get out as a result? Because there's people out there who will do exactly as you say, keep cards only for 1 year and cancel, before the second year annual fee comes due, and then repeat the process to get more points to book more trips, essentially. And I was one of those people, basically when I was starting. So, that's one way you want to do it. It does take a lot of attention. It does take a lot of concentration and organization to make sure you don't accidentally pay a second year's annual fee, right? Because that would leave you in a, $150 to $699 hole if you were to do that. So that's one option. The other option is to your point, some cards are actually, strong enough that it's worth keeping year after year. So for example, one of the best credit cards is probably the American Express Cobalt card in Canada. And it's very strong because you earn 5 times the points on your day-to-day spend. So not just the welcome bonus. Yes, there's a strong welcome bonus of 30,000 points on that one. But the main appeal is that you earn 5 times the points on food and drinks. And that's a big, area of expense for many people in many households, including groceries, by the way. So, not just going out to eat, but also grocery store spend. So if you're able to get 5 times the points, most cards, right, are going to offer you 1 to 2. That card could be well worth holding for that. It's a monthly fee of, I think, $12.99, which, right, ultimately can be quite reasonable for the points that you're earning from just the spend that you have to make anyway. Yeah. That's one example. Another one might be the Amex Bonvoy card, which is Marriott Bonvoy's program. And that's one where, like, every year that you hold the card, it's a $120 fee, but you get a free night award that you can redeem for a Marriott hotel that would otherwise cost, up to $400. So there's an easy value exchange year after year where you're still coming out ahead, as long as you go ahead and maximize that free night award on your travels. So I think for most people, it's going to end up in a mix of the two, right? Cards like the Bonvoy and the Cobalt, it's going to make sense to keep. But cards like some of the higher end ones with big bonuses, let's say Business Platinum, right? That's a $4.99 rising to, actually, this news just came out in September. It's going up to $7.99, the fee. They're going to add some credits to make that more palatable, but still the fee's like pretty high, right? So if you applied in the first year, you got your points. If you determine it's not worth it in the second year, that's your cue to, like, it's basically a value calculation with every action, the sign up and then the renewal. And if it doesn't work for you, then it doesn't work for you. And there is I'll just throw in this extra little bit. There is something you can ask for from the bank, which is called a retention offer. So if that renewal decision doesn't quite work for you, you can say to the bank, and this, the American banks tend to do this more aggressively than the Canadian ones, but in Canada, it's still worth asking. You can say to them, hey, this isn't really looking like it's going to be worth the fee for the second year for me, but, is there anything you can offer to sweeten the deal? So it's like another sign-up bonus that they could offer, and it's something you have to call in to get and ask for, but they could offer you, say, a handful of points to keep the card and to pay another year's fee, or waive a portion of the fee as well. So lots of those strategies you can try as well, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So there's no pressure to keep cards into the second year is basically the answer to your question.
Okay, that's interesting, because that's a pretty significant jump, but it sounds like, to combat that rise in price, like you mentioned, there's a few things you can kind of do to make it maybe a bit more palatable. Ricky, you talk about playing the game. Like, who shouldn't play this game? I'm sure, like, some people try to sign up for a bunch of cards. They don't make their payments on time. They can actually not put themselves into financial ruin, but I'm sure that has happened. Just who should maybe kind of avoid playing this game? Maybe it's common sense. Make your payments on time.
It's a good question. Yeah. And like I said earlier, I'm speaking to you, and I imagine a majority of the audience fits in this category of, people who kind of take their financial health and growth seriously. So that obviously means, like, not paying the 20% plus APRs that credit card companies charge, right? So if you're in any way beholden to credit card debt or struggle with it, or see yourself struggling with it, then it's something to be careful of. If you're somebody who, if given access to a high credit limit, may just be tempted to go and blow that on, purchases you don't need, that's a risk factor. I'd also say, like, if you're, I think you do have to have a certain appetite for travel to really benefit from the rewards. Like I said, the highest value ways to redeem your points tends to be business class and first class flights. And even if you don't necessarily care for those experiences, even if you redeem for economy class travel, that's still, there's still significant value on the table. But if you're not into travel, then you kind of might prefer the simplicity of a cashback card, let's say, because that's really the only appeal that cashback cards offer is simplicity. Like, you just spend on it, don't have to think about it, and you get, like, your 1.5% back at the end of the year, right? So if you're somebody who isn't enthusiastic about travel, doesn't dream about traveling the world, doesn't, see the potential upside that might bring to your life, then cashback card might be the way to go. And the last piece I'd say is, if you're somebody who's just either, don't see yourself as being very organized or can't particularly bother with, some of the legwork that we've talked about that are required for success in this game, then don't play, because it's if it's not going to bring you joy, if it's going to be a point of frustration, and if you don't see yourself as likely to come out and winning the game, then maybe it's better to not play.
So this year, my wife Seema and I decided that we wanted to start traveling the world today with our kids and start creating amazing memories now rather than putting all of this off until later. So what I ended up doing was I ended up signing up for the American Express Business Platinum card. Signing up for the card gave me 100,000 points immediately, which I converted to Aeroplan points, and this allowed me to book an amazing trip. On spending, I get 1.25 points for every dollar spent across all categories. What I've now done is I couple this card with what I think is a phenomenal card, the American Express Cobalt card, which every Canadian can benefit from. You get 5 points for every dollar spent on food and drink, 3 points for every dollar spent on streaming services, and 2 points for every dollar spent on gas. I think together, these credit cards make a great tag team. It's working really well for me. So in the show notes, I have included links to both cards if you feel like these cards can benefit you. Now, please note, if you use the links, I will get some travel points. But if you've been benefiting from Beyond MD and the content that's been put out for the last 3 years, and you feel like supporting the podcast, I, of course, would be truly, truly grateful. But hold on a second, we have to understand the fees as well, right? So the Cobalt card comes at a monthly fee of $12.99 a month. Now the American Express Business Platinum card has a current fee of $499 a year, which is increasing as of September 26th this year to $799 a year. I'll admit, I was a little bit surprised by this, but as I began to dig a bit deeper, I realized that there were a lot of credits that I could get. So you will be able to get a $200 travel credit. You'll also be able to get a cell phone credit for $120. And then recently, I booked a trip using luxuryescapes.ca. That website was also eligible for a temporary credit. So I received $300 back on my statement, which effectively reduced my first annual fee of this card of $499 down to $199. Totally worth it if you ask me. So what's my point here? Yes, some credit cards come with some pretty hefty fees, but there are some big benefits like getting a lot of travel points. And then if you do research and dig beyond the surface, you can benefit from credits along the way. And now back to my interview with Ricky Zhang. Okay, so we've talked about the sign-up bonuses as being a good way to accumulate points rapidly. Are there any other ways, Ricky, that we can accumulate points a little bit faster that we should know about?
So definitely look into shopping portals. That's an often that's an often overlooked way of racking up the points, because especially when it comes to shopping seasons, right? Black Friday, Boxing Day, major holidays, all of the shopping portals. And when I say shopping portals, I mean like in Canada, the biggest one would be Air Canada's Aeroplan and their e-store, right? Which is basically shop through the portal and you will earn like 5 to 10 times the points on your purchase. So if you spend, a few $1,000s, that's a few like 10 to 20,000 points that will instantly get you closer towards your next trip, or be enough for a trip all on its own. And the best bonuses of 5 to 10 times, those multipliers tend to come around during the shopping season. So if you're doing online shopping, you always want to be doing so through a portal and getting, maximizing your returns there.
That is helpful to know. So you mentioned in terms of good cards, one to accumulate points in the spend, the American Express Cobalt. So just so I understand this, 5 points per dollar spent on food and drink. So that includes bars, restaurants, even your groceries. And that's up to $30,000 in that category, right? So you can accumulate 150,000 points for the year? Yeah, okay.
Correct. Up to 30,000. They also recently added a cap, I should clarify, of they split that $30,000 cap into monthly caps. So they restricted a little bit. So it's like a monthly cap of $2,500 now. So they're just like looking to create a little more breakage, I guess, because I guess in the past you could have spent like a big client dinner on like, $5 grand and earn 5 times the points on that.
Yeah, they're getting smarter. Yeah.
They're getting smarter, but we're also getting smarter. So those kind of, if you're in the community, if you're into maximizing points, it's all about continuing to find the latest edge, the latest way to stay ahead of the curve.
Do any cards come to mind, Ricky, for small business owners? Because a lot of my listeners are incorporated small business owners. And so, and just generally, given our expenses related to medical practice, we probably tend to be heavier spenders on average. So given those criteria, are there any good cards that come to mind?
The two best in Canada are probably the American Express Business Platinum and the RBC Avion Visa Infinite Business. So the strengths of these two cards, I'd go with the Business Platinum first. And just further context for listeners, American Express points are going to be the most valuable points you want to earn. because they transfer to a range of travel partners like Aeroplan, like British Airways, like Air France Flying Blue. If you know your airlines, these are the three major airline alliances, right? So Star Alliance, Oneworld, and SkyTeam. So basically, by having American Express points, you have the ability to transfer them to key programs in all three alliances. So if you're going anywhere, you can look into booking flights with basically all the major airlines in the world. More context around alliances. The way that works is like, Air Canada's Aeroplan is partnered with a bunch of airlines, and then British Airways is partnered with a bunch of different airlines. So if you have Air Canada points, you can't book with Oneworld. You can only book with the Star Alliance. So because Amex points are so transferable to all these partners, they give you the flexibility and the versatility that you need, right? When planning a trip, maybe one airline won't have seats to your destination, but the other one will. So that's why you want American Express points. And, for the listenership here, if you're spending a lot on just medical expenses, that's probably not going to fall into like travel, dining, groceries, gas, like these common categories for credit card, for elevated returns. So that's why you want a solid base multiplier, right? So for every dollar you spend on any purchase, you want like higher than 1 point per dollar spent.
Right.
And in Canada, 1.25 is about as good as it gets for that. And that's what you'll find on the Business Platinum. So you get 1.25 times the points on the Business Platinum. The other strength here that isn't talked about a lot is, despite the high annual fee, there's going to be some credits there that soften the blow there. One of the hidden strengths is it's the strongest card for referring your friends and family to cards of their own. And that's another, and I should have mentioned that when you asked about other ways to rack up the points, because that's another very unique thing that American Express uniquely offers is refer a friend, and you can earn with the Business Platinum up to 20,000 points per friend who opens a card of their own, just for, sending them your link and them opening the card. So, and if you really want to get into maximizing, you could do this within a household, right? So you and your partner both open cards and your partner uses your referral link. That's 20,000 points instantly, plus the sign-up bonus on the partner's end. So, that's there's lots of possibilities once you get into what's known as 2-player mode or more, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, that's the core, one of the core reasons why I'd say, Business Platinum, and then RBC Avion 1 is a solid second choice for those vendors who don't take Amex.
Perfect. So I'm happy you mentioned that. I have both cards. So I have an Avion. So yeah, like you said, if there's a certain vendor that doesn't take Amex, I have my Avion to use. Can you just speak a bit more about Avion? It's interesting for us because some of us do take part with RBC VIP banking. Naturally, we get Avion cards. So I think it's a useful currency for people to understand. But just in terms of sign-up bonuses, accumulation on the spend, and just the overall versatility of the Avion point system, what do we need to know there? How useful is it?
Yeah, I'd say it's I've noticed that RBC Avion is quite popular, just among Canadians in general and among private banking profile type of households. And that's a good thing, because I'd say after American Express, RBC Avion points is probably the second most valuable currency that you want to collect. And that also goes back to they're the only one out of the big 5 Canadian banks, actually, who have their own points that can be transferred to other programs. Like American Express offers, Aeroplan, BA, and Air France, RBC's partners are mostly concentrated in the Oneworld Alliance. So it's not going to be the same range of partners, but they do have partnerships with American Airlines, Cathay Pacific, and British Airways, and all 3 of which are in Oneworld. And remember that British Airways was an American Express partner as well. So if you're in both ecosystems, then you could pool your points into British Airways and then have more points as a result to book like whatever you were going to book, right? So that's another angle of thinking about things. But overall, RBC, because it's useful for directing your Avion points into one of these Oneworld programs, and they're all a little bit different, but they can all book the same airlines as a result. And one of the prominent examples is going to be Qatar Airways, who fly to a range of North American cities, and Montreal is their only Canadian destination, but they have the world's best business class. And that's one of the most attractive uses of points, is to go ahead and, regular spend, whether it's personal or business, and then transfer your points over to British Airways and book quite honestly, an incredible, business class experience. I don't know if some of you may have seen photos of Qatar Airways. It's called Q Suites, but it's an incredible, lie flat business class experience. The service is also great and the food is delicious. So yeah, it's one of the best prizes on offer, and RBC is great for that. So if you're with a Big Five bank, it should be RBC if you're into maximizing points.
Great to know. So let's move on to redeeming points in an efficient way, Ricky. I know you've talked about the versatility of American Express points and then also the RBC Avion system. A lot of us use Aeroplan, so I'd like to just dive into a bit of detail on kind of how to use Aeroplan points in the right way. Following you, I've come across some terms like preferred pricing, dynamic pricing. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that so we can use our points efficiently. And then also just generally speaking, like if I'm going to be booking a trip, should I be looking as early as possible into booking that trip? Because I have one in mind for next June. But looking ahead, is that always going to give me a better deal?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's a few layers to that. So let's dig in at dynamic pricing and what that is, right? So going back to how everything works, right, and how the loyalty program is set up by an airline to serve their own needs, right? Air Canada now owns Aeroplan. It used to be spun off. They took it in-house in 2020. Mm-hmm. Air Canada, obviously thinks about ways to leverage the program to meet their needs on the airline's operational side. So essentially what happens is they treat the redemption process for Air Canada's own flights differently than for partner flights, where it's a different airline, different airlines like revenue and balance sheet considerations that they're just making seats available for Aeroplan members to book because they're all part of this alliance and all the programs operate better when they're all working together, right? So if you're using Aeroplan points to book Air Canada flights, you're subject to something called dynamic pricing, which is where you can theoretically use points to book every seat on the flight. But if you're booking like the very last seat, like I talked about, Air Canada knows that could go for a lot of money. So it's also going to charge you a lot of points if you want to take that seat, because it's basically like you're paying for the potential lost revenue that you're taking up in that seat by using points. On the other hand, the prices for flights that are operated by partners are going to be fixed, and they're usually be more favorable than Air Canada flights, because the way dynamic pricing works is once those first few seats that Air Canada kind of drips feeds out there is taken, all of the other prices are going to increase, right? As you get closer and closer to a sold out flight, the price is going to rise. Whereas for partners, there's a fixed price and it's generally favorable, but there's also going to be a limited number of seats that you can book on every flight. And usually it's like 2 at most in business, right? Economy, sometimes more, sometimes like 6 or 8 or more. Business class, mostly it's like most airlines choose to release 2 business class seats at the very start of the schedule. So that means like 11 to 12 months out, to your point, to their partners.
Okay.
And then they might release more, right, later on. Like if they're feeling that this flight is projected to not sell out, they might release more to their partners just to like keep the whole loyalty ecosystem going. But then the other big piece comes at the last minute window, which is 2 weeks out before departure. Okay. And this is when airlines really have a good idea of how likely they are to sell a seat for revenue. And if it's looking unlikely, they will go ahead and say, okay, let's release this to the partners so that, at least some traveler in our alliance's ecosystem gets this good feeling of a free flight, and they're more loyal to all of us as a result. That's going back to how the whole system works. So what to take from that is if you're looking for these really favorably priced seats, remember, we're not talking about dynamic pricing because that's going to go up to like, 300,000 points one way when it really should cost 60 to 80,000, right, to go to Europe. Okay. So if we're talking about these favorably priced seats, the best windows are either 1 year in advance or close to that, so 11 to 12 months, or 2 weeks out. Wow. And remember when I said you have to think about planning travel differently than normal. Like if you want the best odds for success, you have to be comfortable with planning a trip during either of these 2 windows. And if not, then you're dealing with slim pickings in terms of what's available to book, right? You might only find dynamically priced Air Canada flights, and that can be a frustrating experience. And that's frankly the experience for most people when they log on to Aeroplan and they're just thinking like, oh, I normally plan trips 4 months out. Let's see what's available. It's like nothing but 300,000 points one way to Europe, and that like turns a lot of people off the program. So that's the key thing to know. It's either 1 year out or 2 weeks out. And the 2 weeks thing is honestly, I think, I can see why most people aren't necessarily comfortable with that. What I might say there is, if you're just somebody who wants to kind of do things the normal way, but still wants to play the game, whenever you're looking to book, whether it's 3 or 4 or 6 months out, book something that, the good thing about booking with points is there's generally a lot more flexibility to making changes and cancellations compared to paying cash. Oftentimes when you're booking like the cheapest economy flight, your money's just tied up and you can't even make changes. And then if you need to change, it's like $5, right? With points, there's more favorable change fees. It's usually like $100 per person. Or thereabouts. And so what I'd say is book something that you're happy with that's available. And then when you're at the 2 week window, really think about optimizing, because that's when there's more business class seats, like really attractive options like Q suites that we mentioned that you could potentially change to and unlock a better experience.
Okay. I want to throw one example out there. So next June, I'm looking at a potential trip to Portugal. So mainland Portugal, also spending some time in the Azores and then coming back to Toronto. I know you've talked about, and this might be a good place to talk about a few additional resources that one can use to kind of supplement how they go about redeeming points. But let's say I was going to book this trip like 11 months out. How should I kind of go about redeeming points in the most efficient way possible? And are there any additional resources that I can use to plan my trip and get the most bang for my buck out of my points?
There's definitely a lot of resources you should consider, and I'm happy to drop a few here as I sketch out, your best approach. First step, you'll probably want to go to a website called flightconnections.com. And the reason this website is useful is because it answers the question of which airlines can you actually fly to your destination. Like you need to know that, right, to start thinking about which flights to book. But when most people plan travel, they don't think about that. They just go and look for origin destination. They look at the list, but you kind of need to know which flights you're aiming for. So go to Flight Connections, and then as you're planning this trip, so I assume Toronto, Lisbon, and Ponta Delgada in Azores, and then back, you'll find that there's not really going to be a lot of good airlines to fly to and from the Azores from either Toronto or Lisbon, because the primary airline there is going to be Azores Airlines, and they don't actually, and in your research, you would then find that they don't actually participate in an alliance that is bookable on points. So you might be looking at, shelling out cash for that flight, but doing maybe business class Toronto-Lisbon to kick off the trip. And the interesting thing when you start playing around, looking at some of the possibilities is it's in fact quite feasible to combine a few one-ways into a big trip. Whereas most people think like, I'm just going to go book a round trip and that's it, right? But if you're looking for Toronto-Lisbon, you'll see TAP Air Portugal flies that. And that's an airline that's part of Star Alliance. And that's an airline you could use Aeroplan points for. And now we're about 10 months out. So if you were to look, there's probably a better chance now than if you were to wait that you'd actually find, let's say, 2 business class seats on TAP Air Portugal or 2 business class seats on Air Canada that are priced at the lower end of the dynamic spectrum that's still reasonable, right? Yeah. If you were to wait, then somebody else might snap that up and then it's just going to be gone. So that's kind of how I would approach it. If, let's say, you're like, I really want to use my points, then that's where this core tenet in this game that we call, it's just flexibility, right? The more flexibility you have, the more likely you are to find something that you can actually maximize your points and put them to good use for. Let's say you were flexible in your destination and let's say you were flexible to mix up the Azores and do, somewhere else in Europe instead, then you might be able to do round trip business class because you'll find airlines that fly, from, Switzerland or Germany back to Toronto. So the more flexible, the better in terms of dates, destinations, routing possibilities and all of that.
Yeah, Ricky, I do appreciate all the talk about business class. I could tell you though, like I just feel like with my kids, I don't know how much I'd enjoy the experience right now, because they'll sit, they'll watch their iPad. I'll just be kind of reading the whole way, or I'll be passed out on the flight. But I do appreciate like, you having experienced all this for a long flight, or maybe for any flight, how it can certainly enhance the experience if you're kind of with the right people. But
Yeah,
I
I'll say
appreciate
a
all
few
that.
things about that. I think if you're
Yeah.
with kids, I think that's definitely a fair consideration. It's also harder to find four seats or however many kids, right, in business class. The
Yeah,
bigger
two
the
kids, yeah.
family,
Yeah.
the harder it is to find that all in business class. I mean, some parents, it's up to every parent like how they travel, but the same principle could apply for four seats in economy, right? It's the same idea. It's just you just need to accept that the value you're getting from your points compared to the cash fare is just not as high, but it's just whatever works for people, right? Ultimately, value on paper doesn't mean anything compared to value, in terms of happiness. And the other thing I'd say
Exactly,
is, look,
yeah.
I mean, I get it, but you could apply the same principles to like a couple's getaway that you guys do, maybe on a different trip, right? So it's useful. Useful for everybody to know, and just to tailor that knowledge to the particular travel outcomes that they're looking for.
So, Ricky, some of the stuff we've been talking about today, I think it's super relevant, especially for the traveler who's interested in learning and maybe taking things to the next level. But for people who are really busy and say, I may not have time for this, I understand that you guys also offer a concierge service. Do you want to just tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say there's two potential services that might be useful for this crowd. One is our consulting service, which is an hourly, consultation where you can book an hour with a member of our team and basically ask any questions you might have around the best credit cards to get, the best credit cards to assemble as part of your strategy. Building your overall strategy with a desired destination in mind. Or maybe you've gotten the points, like you have collected points over the years, but now need help maximizing it, right? All the things we talked about, the right websites to use for searching the right routes, the right airlines to look for, like when to book, all of these considerations is the bread and butter of what we do at Prince of Travel. So I think that consulting service could be really useful for anybody just looking for, one-time help or even recurring. And then our concierge service is it's a higher touch, higher ticket offering where we're really looking to assist, very frequent travelers, and people who also earn a lot of points organically. So let's say big business owners, or if you have a big medical practice, if you have a lot of points flowing in and don't really know how to maximize it, but also you need to travel, but this, the bridge between the two, the actual actions, is beyond like what you kind of care to learn for yourself, and that's where concierge steps in. Where that's something where we really, get to know the client on the basis of an annual engagement, and we optimize your strategy at the start of that engagement, and then anytime you're looking to book a trip, you've got one of our concierge account managers on call to go ahead and optimize that on your behalf, whether you are paying cash or points. But really looking to get the client the best possible experience whilst saving time and money along the process.
One thing I forgot to ask you about, Aeroplan Elite status. What is that? How do you get there? And how powerful is that?
Yeah, that's very much a program set up for Air Canada's frequent flyers, right? It's designed for travelers who have a choice between airlines, especially to choose Air Canada more frequently. So basically, it's very much tied to your flying activity and spending with Air Canada. So the higher of both that you get, the higher status you achieve, and the higher status you achieve, the more benefits you unlock. So that's where things like complimentary upgrades, or it's called e-upgrade credits that you can apply to a flight. That's where those things come in. That's where you might get complimentary lounge access before any flight, even in economy, right? Because usually business class you get lounge access, but if you have high status, you can use that to access the lounge as well, both for you and your family. And at the top tier, you have access to Air Canada's concierge service. So that's where they've got a dedicated team who can basically make magic happen when you're traveling. Like, they're just going to solve your problems. Like if you miss a flight and it's your fault, they will still probably get you onto the next flight, like at no cost. Whereas really? If you don't have status, you're just completely screwed, right? You're just like, you're out that money. And that's the average traveler's experience. So that's basically rewarding loyalty, right? The more you fly, you get that service, and then you're treated like a VIP.
Ricky, we've talked about so many things today. Like for people who are just busy or just looking to just get started, like what are the top two or three things that maybe they should think about to get started so that they're traveling, seeing the world in an efficient way, incorporating some of the principles that we've discussed today?
I think the most common, message that's going to apply to most people is basically there's opportunities to leverage the spending that you're doing day to day on regular, life expenses that you would spend anyway. There's an opportunity to turn that into limitless travel possibilities, right? So just becoming aware of that is the first step. And I'm hopeful that, many listeners will have found today's episode valuable for that purpose. And then it's just about, I think a lot of people, so many people say that they'd love to travel the world like one day, or it's just something they'd love to do, but get bogged down in kind of day-to-day responsibilities, and it becomes something that falls by the wayside. So now that you know about this possibility of making that happen, it's time to get serious about like what are the key destinations that you really think would be a transformative experience for you, and then it's just about getting that strategy in place by doing a bit of research, maybe speaking to our team or consuming some more content from us around how to actually make it happen. So yeah, it goes back to the strategy piece and assembling that from the goal in mind that you have.
Awesome. Okay, let's bring this home with a quick rapid fire. You've traveled a lot of first class. What's your favorite first class cabin?
Singapore Airlines Suites class is what it's called. And that's the one where you've got 6 seats in the cabin. There's one aisle, 3 seats on either side. And the first 2 rows on either side can combine to become a double bed in the sky. That's my favorite.
Oh man. Okay. What's your next dream trip?
Next dream trip, let's say after this one, which is pretty much a dream trip in itself, I'd love to spend some time in India. Actually, it's a big gap for me on my map, and I would love to spend a few weeks hopping around the country.
I know you had a few blogs about your bachelor party. I know that was really, really interesting. But what was your favorite stop on your bachelor party?
Yeah, the bachelor party was fun. That was the team really, really went above and beyond on that. Favorite stop? It's really hard. I mean, we did 3 nights in Bangkok, 1 night in Hong Kong, 1 night in Tokyo, and flew 2 of the world's best business class and 2 of the world's first class with bars along the way. So if I had to pick one favorite part, it's probably the Bangkok-Hong Kong flight in Emirates, because we just all got together at the bar in the back and had a bit of a booze cruise as a group of 4.
Yeah,
so,
okay.
That's another example of just special experiences that most people would never think to do for, let's say, a bachelor party. But, given like the work we've done and the learning that I've put in over the years, it's something I feel very fortunate to have been able to do.
Is it fair for me to kind of ask you, like we've talked about different cards and different benefits today, if you were going to create like a portfolio of maybe 4 or 5 credit cards that you think like a working professional would really, really benefit from? I know a few have come up repetitively today, but like what would you put in that portfolio of cards?
American Express Cobalt card, right, for your food and drink spend as a real workhorse to earn points on that major expense. I'd probably add the American Express Marriott Bonvoy card in there as well. It's really the only option in Canada for hotel points, but it'll get you that free night award every year. That's worthwhile. And then, it's a reason to be loyal within the Marriott ecosystem, which is the world's biggest in terms of footprint. Probably toss in a Visa or a MasterCard in there as well. And that's just like not every place accepts American Express. So I think there's a few choices you can make, right? One is, it probably boils down to between TD Aeroplan, which TD Aeroplan Visa Infinite, right, gives you some Air Canada perks and tightens you in that Aeroplan ecosystem that the Cobalt, that's the best place to start. And the TD Aeroplan is another layer on top. Or if you wanted to diversify and have some more options, then it'd be either the RBC Avion Visa Infinite, which we kind of talked about. That's a pathway towards some of those One World programs, and that's a Visa card, right, that you can use that's going to be accepted everywhere. Another shout would go to the HSBC World Elite MasterCard, which is pretty underrated, but it's got no foreign exchange fees, which is pretty rare among Canadian cards. And that's a program also probably the third choice behind Amex and RBC. And in fact, the only like other Canadian points program that actually lets you earn points that can transfer to, in this case, it's Cathay Pacific.
Amazing. Yeah.
British Airways and Singapore Airlines. Going back to Singapore Suites, that's your pathway into that experience. So that'd be my recommendation.
You know what? This might be a bit of a silly question, but I've heard from people, last question, people who are playing the game, they're often managing like a portfolio of multiple credit cards. Like how many cards do people hold? Like, is it fair for me to even ask you, like when you were you're probably at the peak of your game now, but like how many credit cards do you kind of have on the go at a single time to kind of optimize how you do things?
Well, if you think about it, there's no real upper limit, especially when you think about, let's go back to the credit score answer. Like, because it doesn't negatively impact your score, there's no real upper limit to how many cards a given individual can hold in theory. It's up to, some financial institutions may not want to extend too much credit to any given individual. So that's a consideration. But remember, I talked about 2-player mode or more. If you're managing cards, you start out on your own. Oftentimes, the best way to scale is you get cards for your partner, and you also get cards for your parents or your kids who are 18 plus, and then it just snowballs from there. So it depends. It depends on how hard you want to go, how much you want to travel, and how much first class you want to fly. But I have like between 30 and 40 cards right now, probably among my household. So that's
wow, impressive. Okay, Ricky, any closing thoughts as we wrap up? Yeah. Any closing thoughts at all?
I'd just like to say thank you, Yatin, for having me on. It's always fun to explore this topic with a unique focused audience who might very, very meaningfully benefit from it. And I do think your audience of medical professionals, in our current community, I see a fair few medical professionals already, excelling and really taking their life outside of work, their travel experiences to the next level, thanks to the expenses and the life they already have. So I'd love to hopefully see the same from much of your audience, and then you know where to find me.
Yeah, Ricky, hey, thank you for joining me today. Honestly, I think this is such an interesting rabbit hole. I'm truly fascinated by it, and a big part of it is I decided, my wife and I made a conscious effort this year that we want to travel more with the family and kind of live our best life today. And I think the content that you put out helps people to do that. So Ricky, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Yatin. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, so credit card portfolios, if you don't want to spend too much time, I think Ricky's summary was really good. Here's what I do. I think for accumulating points on the daily spend, the American Express Cobalt card is bar none the best card to have. I couple that with the American Express Business Platinum card, which obviously gave me the enormous welcome bonus, but allows me to accumulate 1.25 points for every dollar spent in categories other than gas, streaming services, and food and drink. I also have my RBC Avion Visa cards for when American Express is not accepted. That's also a very useful currency. And then I also recently signed up for the MasterCard World Elite from HSBC, which basically eliminates the foreign currency transactions so I can spend when I travel without getting charged 2.5%. So guys, thank you for continuing to support Beyond MD. Honestly, it means the world to me. All of my links and Ricky's links will be in the show notes, and I will see you in 3 weeks' time. We are heading out for our first family trip to Europe. We will be in central Italy. I've been waiting for this for such a long time. We've been talking about this forever. I'm so excited it's finally happening, and I can't wait to come back and share the experiences with everyone. And until next time, stay well, stay savvy, and most importantly, keep spending that quality time with the loved ones in your life, because it's time well spent. We'll see you soon.